I'm Stan Berkowitz, writer for Justice League, Superman, Batman, Batman Beyond, and you are listening to Nerd On.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Nerd On, the podcast you didn't need, but you deserve, and where all levels of nerd are welcome. We have a very exciting episode for you. Way back when the pyramids were still young, we were at San Diego Comic-Con 2019, and we met our guest. He is a writer, as you heard at the top, for an ample, the notable works. I'm just gonna
go.
I'm gonna
roll out the paper.
All of them.
T.J. Hooker, Spider-Man, the animated series, Batman and Superman, the world's finest, Superman, the animated series. The list goes on and on and on and on, and it's amazing. And we're so happy to have you here, Stan. Thank you for joining us and our audience.
Happy to be here.
A little bit of housekeeping. I am Josh.
I'm Tom.
Ollie.
Caitlin.
And this episode is brought to you in part by the members of the Nerd On Nation that is powered by Patreon. As members of the Nerd On Nation, you do get fun stuff like a Discord server in which you can talk to us, the host. Also, a whole bunch of other fans that are in there talking about gardening and comic books and
pets.
Cooking.
Do-it-yourself projects.
Yeah, do-it-yourself is now a new one, and today I learned there's a lot going on, bonus episodes, early access, a lot. But yeah, check that out, nerdon.io/Patreon. And one last, because it really applies here, our friends over at Comixology. You can check them out. They are the internet's #1 source for comic books. And a little bit of every purchase does go to us keeping the lights on. But yeah, check that out. nerdon.io/Comixology. And that is the housekeeping.
Ding.
Now we can actually have fun. Now we can have some talking. So yeah. Stan, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, big time.
All of our audience, I'm sure, has at some form of fashion watched or is familiar with your work in some place in their childhood dreams. And I think you definitely hear it more than often than most people. Like, you help create people's childhood. Some of the most craziest sagas, at least some of my favorite episodes of certain shows like Justice League and Spider-Man, like Neogenic Nightmare, Sins of the Father. So like all the great sagas that happened in those shows, like, you helped create. I mean, again, like Josh said, we can go through the list of all the things we did, but I mean, I think we're just gonna be here to.
Are you more of a Marvel guy?
I'm a little bit of both. I'm actually pretty hard on the DC.
He's DC boy.
I love the DC stuff, but I grew up watching the X-Men,
But
Spider-Man.
you're more critical of DC.
I think since I've been more exposed to DC, I am able to see it for all the strengths and opportunities as well. But I mean, I've stayed closer to the DC characters than I have with the Marvel characters. But I like to think I have a good general,
balance,
casual knowledge of all of them.
Casual. He says casual.
Just watching all the DC shows more than once.
Well, why don't we start with like a nice solid foundation question? How did writing for all of these superheroes come into your life? How did that start?
Just purely by accident. I mean,
Yeah?
you seriously, you hear these stories. Well, my agent set me up with a meeting with so-and-so. That's exactly what happened.
Nice.
I'd been doing police type shows.
Oh, wow.
The T.J. Hooker, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
A little bit on Mike Hammer, another show called Houston Nights. And the agent one day just simply called and said, "Hey, do you want to go to Orlando for a year?" And I said, "For what?" And he goes, "A show called Superboy," which had already had 2 seasons, and they needed, they were kind of revamping the show.
Yeah.
And I went and I was interviewed along with several other candidates for the job.
Whoa.
And I got it. And it was just as simple as that. I had no experience except as a casual reader of comic books when I was a kid.
I mean, I think that's the best experience, right?
The reason I got the job was apparently that none of the other writers who went up for the job had even seen the show.
Oh.
And
Wow.
I had seen Superboy's earlier seasons. So I was able to talk about it a little bit, and they were really impressed with that.
That's
Yeah.
great.
But that gives them a bit more confidence as far as like your
An
ability
interest
to
in the material.
maintain the show.
That's
Yeah.
one of those few times where watching TV pays off.
Right.
It always
working
pays,
at you.
it always pays off.
That's true. It does.
Watch
It
more
does.
TV, kids.
Watch more TV.
For some of our audience that haven't watched Superboy, do you mind kind of giving us a little bit of rundown of like what that show was? Because it was in a different time. Like right now we're in the big, movie blockbuster age, and we have CW as well as Netflix and all these other different shows. But
This was real early stuff.
Yeah, talk about
I think that prior to Superboy, the only thing that I recall as being a superhero TV series was Superman with George Reeves.
Wow.
So this was new stuff. They were shooting in a new place, Orlando, which had studios, but really not a big reserve of talent, which was why they had to fly people like me in from LA. Half-hour shows, live action, early days of video special effects.
Yeah.
So some early on,
Super practical.
mostly, but some of the video effects, some of the effects are kind of crude,
Oh.
especially in the early seasons.
Yeah.
And then they got better and better because that was right at the time that people were doing more and more video effects.
I'm
Yeah.
sure it was a spectacle at the time, though. Still.
At that time, I don't know. I mean, the ratings were not terribly good.
Oh.
TV shows tend to wax and wane just between different seasons, especially as like production gets better. Like sometimes, narrative or whatever, the audience might change or move to something else. Yeah, it just kind of depends. Especially with superhero stuff, it's hard to, make sure you're getting the right demographic of like kids to teens to adults.
Right. They brought me in because of my background, which was more adult. It wasn't kids TV.
Nice.
So they were hoping to do that. And then, of course, the problem is maybe what you had was the best you could do. And maybe by trying to move it, trying to get a larger audience, you in fact get a smaller audience. You lose the people who liked it, and you don't really appeal to the people.
You might alienate people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. In doing these shows like Public Enemies and New Frontier, that was the question, because they're a little bit more adult. They're PG-13 rated, and
Hell yeah.
and I sort of worried, were we gonna lose the kids? We're gonna chop off part of the young kid audience, but will we appeal enough to the adults to make up for it? So that was a real concern when we were doing this.
It's,
Wow.
Imagine.
it's really funny as our other host who's not here today, Corey, him and I always, it's not like a laughing matter, but it's more something that we've always bonded and agreed with, is that most of the DC animated shows have always kind of had that kind of flavor where like, oh, this is definitely being played during kid times to watch, like,
But
Saturday
they
morning
weren't
cartoons.
treating the kids like idiots.
They weren't treating the
Right.
kids like idiots, but
Well-
also they had subject matter that were like, adults could be like, oh, I'm okay with my child watching this because they're learning from a good source, like a positive source of where they can get good lessons of.
Yeah, I mean
It's very open-minded of you.
I was doing Spider-Man when the Alan, Paul, Bruce, and the others were doing Batman, and it's quite envious.
I mean,
I love the artwork, and I love the fact that they were. You can't really call it adult, like you said. It doesn't insult an adult's intelligence, but there's nothing in it that a kid wouldn't understand.
I remember, I think it was like one of the episodes of Spider-Man the Animated Series when Venom.
Spider-Man,
Yeah, because you worked on Spider-Man.
yes.
When Venom's is going to crash land, and one of the characters says, its trajectory will get it to the Brooklyn Bay or the river. And I, for the first time as a kid, I was like, what's trajectory? And then I was like, whoa. I was like, this
Some
show's
fancy
not playing
words.
around. But then that also, came in line with that.
I can
do
tell
with
you that line.
that. Oh.
All that vocabulary stuff came from the Fox executive named Sid Iwanter, who's available for an interview, by the way.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Good to know.
I'll
Good to
give
know.
I'll give you his number.
Yes, please.
Sid wanted to expand vocabulary. Obviously, he wasn't a guy going for more violence or more sex, but
Yeah.
he did want to expand vocabulary and make the shows more intelligent. And now, something completely different on that same Brooklyn Bridge sequence. We had a terrible problem with Venom because it was very early in the series, as you recall.
Yeah.
And some other writer would sit down and write an outline, and then we had a group of, I think, 4 people who could judge it. Sid, who I mentioned, that's Fox Network.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Richardson, who was, I guess he was the producer, but he was the lead animator. He was in charge of everything in terms of the picture and image and all that. Avi Arad, who ran the toy company at that time that owned Marvel,
It's connected to everything Spider-Man now.
and Stan Lee.
Mhm.
So if one of them liked the outline for Venom, someone else didn't. And it just became a circle of rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And so we gathered all of them. I walked up to Stan Lee and I said, Stan, I mean, I'm stealing money from you because I'm rewriting stuff. And then the guy who I rewrote is going to complain, and I'll push it back to what he was doing. we weren't getting anywhere. So they all sat down in the same room. All those people, plus John Semper, who is the writing producer, and me, who I'm basically taking notes. And we got to the point where all four of them would sit down and figure out the story for Venom.
Whoa.
It is better to work for one person with bad taste than four people with good taste. Trust me on that.
There's a lot of chefs in the kitchen.
The day went on and on and on. They're bringing in food, And
Oh my gosh.
obviously, it's going. This story stuff's hard. But regarding the bridge, I don't know if anybody's ever told this part of it.
No.
The space shuttle was going to land on Brooklyn Bridge. Avi wanted that. It'd be great to see the space shuttle land on Brooklyn Bridge. But Bob Richardson's saying, well, wait a minute. And I'm not sure of the compass directions here, but the Brooklyn Bridge goes north-south, he might have said. But the space shuttle's orbit is east-west. And the space shuttle doesn't have any way to correct itself. It's basically just a brick landing.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, this is impossible. We can't do it. And everybody else in the room just said, we're doing it.
Oh, wow.
So it did in fact land on the Brooklyn Bridge, confounding aeronautics in all possible ways.
Yeah, because it was actually at first headed towards Kingpin's building, Wilson Fisk's building. And then Fisk was like, we need to go. And then Alistair Smythe says, I'm very good with trajectory. And then it turns and it hits the bridge. I remember that.
Because he knew how it was going.
Yeah,
but
he knew. Well, he was you. You guys were like, oh, we know where it's going.
We went against science and trajectory to have it land
on the bridge.
Because Avi wanted it to land on that bridge.
Now we know.
And he wanted the Rhino show up. He wanted the Rhino to show up too.
Yeah.
Wow.
He showed up there because he tries to steal the thing.
Where did you come from, Brooklyn?
That's true.
Because science.
That
That
might have been my line, actually.
I mean,
I
It's a good line.
contributed very little to these shows.
I mean, looking over your credits, like it's just seeing like how that's that saga as well as the Neogenic Nightmare, which is I believe the introduction of Michael Morbius.
Yeah, he was in there, but this is about the old guy getting young again, or is that a different one?
I think that's another one because there's two Neogenic Nightmare scenarios in that Spider-Man series. One was when Michael Morbius is introduced. And another one when the human spider starts coming out.
That was cool. Great imagery on that one.
No, yeah. I was like, and that's kind of the cool thing that I liked what the Spider-Man animated series did. Before we get into all the great DC stuff you did, like the show was just like, it's like very much comic book. It was just like, we're going to do this run.
That was John
this
Semper.
run. Yeah.
Totally John Semper, because he grew up exactly at that period, and he wanted it to be exactly like the comic book.
Yeah, you would get 4 episodes like here's Hobgoblin, 4 episodes here's Green Goblin, 4 episodes here's that's like okay, so now you just get the saga of this and how they interconnect.
But we introduced Hobgoblin before the Green Goblin.
Yes, you did,
which was a big change from.
So I didn't know as a kid this was like my first.
You weren't even reading comic books yet.
No, I did.
Could you read? Were you old enough to read?
Barely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some question if I could read now.
It's true. Very, very true.
But yeah, this was like my first X-Men, Batman, the animated. They were all my first forays into comic books, and Spider-Man again, like the language as well as like, oh, this is what the characters came from. And so when a lot of people say that's not my Spider-Man, that's not my character, it's like, well, this was my first one, and obviously if someone has an issue with it, then there's more versions. To it.
That Spider-Man that we did with John Semper and Stan.
I love
that. Was the Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd read the comic books and I go, this is just. The comic books tell you exactly what the thing should be, and this is as close as you can possibly get. And then people go, no, it's not it. It's not
no, that's not it.
Well, I mean, yeah, some people look through a different prism, but now, I mean, people have a bigger excuse because now there's so many like multiverses and Elseworlds and the Ultimate Universe, and so it's like, and that's
and retconning, and
in that same way. Again, you kind of open the door for more audiences, but then you might have. The people who have been there for a lot, be alienated a little bit.
We were doing that Elseworld stuff with Superboy in 1990.
Yeah.
Where he'd go in alternate worlds.
Yeah, I mean...
that was the Ron Ely thing I was telling you, where he sort of goes in an alternate world and also involves time travel. Mm-hmm. So he meets an older version of himself.
Okay. That makes sense. Because so for my experience of Superboy, at least from the historical information that I might have, is that there was a lot of writings for Superboy, and then it was kind of like, let's just do the adventures of young Clark Kent. And then,
You're thinking of Smallville.
Yeah, well, the TV show, but then also just like a younger Superboy, and then he joins the Legion of Superheroes. He goes in the future.
Right, that was the comic book.
Yeah, and so having the show, have that, and it's kind of like figuring out like as well having like other characters like this is Wonder Girl as well as Wonder Woman. It's like how do we start connecting these stories together? And so they kind of just lived in their own thing.
The old guys weren't even thinking about that. It's just how do we sell this month's comic book?
Yeah, for me, if I speak for the young people, we're kind of like, oh, how do we look at how does that fit in? Because we love those stories and like we like what those adventures took us, but how does that connect with the Daily Planet and Lois Lane and the rest of the Justice League?
I think the TV and the comic books are two completely different things. Because like you, I started watching superhero stuff before I could read. I was about 3 years old when Superman, the George Reese Superman came out, and that was one thing. And then the comic books, something entirely different. I didn't even know there were comic books until my father brought home an adventure and a detective from 1958.
Isn't that kind of crazy though?
Wow.
I mean, like
You didn't know.
You had like you already knew like what I'm watching and what I'm reading are two different things. Where
Two completely different things.
a lot of I think sometimes bigger head developing people have to make those deciding factors, saying like these are different things. And sometimes a modern audience nowadays don't know the difference. They'll say, "Oh, Kevin Conroy is that Batman, and that also is him too." It's like those are two.
We're
different
obsessed
Batmans.
with our universes.
Yeah.
Well, they get big surprises sometimes. In Public Enemies, as a writer, you're thinking, well, some people are just going to pick this up at Walmart and they just see Superman and Batman and they go for it. And then all of a sudden, Lex Luthor's president of the United States? How could that be?
Yeah.
It's great.
So one of the things we changed from the comic book was we had to explain how an incompetent industrialist could become president of the United States.
Not relevant today at all.
Wow.
If we were doing that today, I probably wouldn't have to make so much of an explanation.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, Frank Miller's recent run, Dark Knight Returns, did a similar thing as well. There was a little nod to
To present times?
yes, present time.
Isn't Frank Miller kind of an arch Republican? Is that gossip that I've heard that's wrong? Or
It might. I don't know. It could be. It could be right. I've
Libertarian?
never met him. I'm not on first name base with
but
him.
how did the comic book?
It just showed an angry person on TV spewing hateful comments.
Oh.
So
And
right.
that's our president?
in the comic book, yes.
All right. So tonight, if you're on watching HBO, we have Robert Redford as president of the United States.
Ah.
Not an actor, but the Robert Redford appearing in the fictional Watchmen as president of the United States.
Oh yeah.
President
Right.
Redford. I give
That's-
a plug to Mr. Lindelof's.
Yeah, that's awesome. Heck yeah.
Genius.
Heck yeah.
It's on tonight, on just a couple of hours.
Yeah,
Heck
you're right.
Nice.
yeah. Any other questions? I'm sorry. I'm just like
Yeah, of
taking
course.
over the whole thing.
So I'm actually really curious about this before we kind of get specifics into different shows, can you talk about kind of the process of writing a show? Like, I mean, you've got live action experience, but you also have, of course, animated experience. How do the two differ in terms of the actual kind of the process of writing for them?
They differ very little, surprisingly.
Really?
Surprisingly little. Initially, when I started doing animation, my friends in live action said, well, you can do anything. You can blow up the universe. You can do whatever you want,
Right.
Which was true at that point. Later on, when we were doing CGI, they literally, they call it building characters, building sets. So you have the same limitations as live action, except the set that they built is only inside a computer. It's not a physical set.
Yeah.
So we have, again, in CGI, those limitations came up probably within 10 years of when I started doing animation.
Oh,
Like what the computer can actually handle?
No, what the crew can handle.
Okay.
Because, we're paying them, they can't be working 24 hours a day.
Oh, yeah.
They can only do so much. They can only design so many characters, and they can only design so many sets.
Yeah.
So that became a concern very quickly in animation as well as live action. The only other difference that I can tell you between writing live action and writing animation is that writing animation usually requires the writer to be more explicit in terms of physical action. You
Okay.
make sure that the artist can see exactly what you want. In live action, very often, I shouldn't say sometimes,
Traditionally.
you'll have a writer write a scene where the two adversaries are about to go at each other, and then you just have the one word or one sentence on the page saying "fight scene to be choreographed," and occasionally, usually, always, the writer will then say, "This is what happens after the fight."
Yeah.
Like this guy wins.
What's the result?
They need to know that. But basically they just say, "Oh, let the
wow.
stuntman figure it out."
Yeah.
Um,
And imagine
Whoa.
for drawing, since they're going to be drawing the cells, they have to know everything up front.
And sometimes it depends on the studio.
Yeah.
Marvel, when I worked for Marvel with Bob Richardson, very explicit. Every punch had to be choreographed.
Mhm.
But the next week, I had 1 week between the two studios. Over at DC, it's like it's a little looser. Like we'll figure it out.
Interesting.
So that was the difference in approaches. But even at DC, where they're willing to figure it out, you could never get away with saying fight scene to be choreographed. You have to give them a pretty good idea. Occasionally, they'll take what you wrote and change it.
Wow.
But you give
Right.
them
But
a
at
little
least
bit
you
of
did your
foundation.
part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't. It would be very unprofessional in animation for the writer to say, "Well, you guys figured it out."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Got to provide some kind of baseline so that they're not just stuck there with a blank page going, what do I do?
Well, usually the artists at DC, I'm sure would have ideas.
Yeah, I mean,
Sounds like it, yeah. If they're that
each-
loose with it.
and that's kind of, I think, working on a show or especially working with these characters, it's really important to get their physicalities correct. Because, I mean, like Batman doesn't fight the same way Superman fights.
No.
Spider-Man doesn't fight the same way Wolverine fights. So it's like, yeah.
Not quite.
Depends on the board artist.
True, I guess.
That's,
It was Superman. We always wondered, what was the extent of his power? I mean, sometimes he has a hard time stopping a locomotive, but then he can lift a planet.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah. Yeah.
we worried about that sometimes.
Those
But
are just his off days.
Yeah, that's in the comic book too, though, and in the movies. I mean, he turns back time.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
That's
in
it.
that first one.
Around the, yep.
Yeah,
Goes
and-
backwards around the earth
Yep.
Yeah.
enough times, and you'll go
That
back
totally
in time.
works.
Yeah, you
It-
make it go backwards, everything's fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in New 52, he's like bench pressing the planet, and in other comic books, he's like using chains to pull a planet away. And
It's earth presses, thank you.
but then other times he gets slapped by Lois Lane. It's like, how's her hand not broken?
Yeah.
Well, you could slap
You take the hit.
slap steel.
Yeah, but I guess he does the cell too.
Yeah,
he
you
moves his
gotta
head
take
a
it.
little bit.
He's slowing the train slowly so that he doesn't hurt the passengers.
True.
Yeah.
Catching inertia.
He's just being
Learning
No,
cautious.
He's struggling. I mean, if you look at those the very early Fleischer cartoons, he's struggling.
struggling.
To
Oh,
do
yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah, his powers is definitely like grown as the situations would have it. So
Or shrink.
yeah, shrink exactly because it's like that's kryptonite, here
Yeah.
and there, or red sunlight, or here's magic. So you can have a bunch.
Magic.
Yeah.
I hated those stories.
It's
Really?
interesting. I think it's cool, at least for me as a fan of the DC world, where it's like at least there's stories like, well, just throw Superman in there. I'll just throw Superman. It's like, well, now just have the magic users have their own fun and do things, and then they use like a Batman or the Question as like the audience surrogate of like, this is the normal person, but here's Zatanna, here's Deadman.
Yeah.
Do you think as we've gotten, I mean, thinking of earlier times and whether it be animation or comics, and now we have nowadays, like, do you think that these superheroes, like their powers have gotten greater? Like they've just made them more
Well, I
overpowered?
know, like specifically, Superman didn't used to be able to fly, right? He could just jump really far.
Hop over a building. And
That was a
single
really long time
A
ago.
long time ago.
I mean, I've always had a problem with the flying too because it's physically impossible. I mean,
What's he doing to fly? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, sometimes he just hovers in midair. How do you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's he doesn't really fly. He levitates
Mhm.
Right.
because if it's that mighty leap that he takes,
That's
there's
what's
just going to go in one trajectory.
Ah.
Well, he would just glide somewhere.
glide somewhere.
Well,
Maybe.
sort of. Wonder Woman initially couldn't fly either,
Jet.
and she would take like air currents. So that
Oh,
Oh.
yeah, it was stupid.
Light as a feather.
Currents.
I remember the
That
jet.
was in the comic books.
Okay, I remember the jet, and I was like, yeah, why does she have a jet if she can fly? And then
She can't fly.
and then she had I believe in Justice League she can fly.
She did fly.
Yeah, and I was
They,
like,
they just decided it. Rich Vogel just said, "Well, she'll fly."
yeah.
Make them all flyers and it'll make it
Why not?
simpler.
And it's like but then they explained it a little bit with like she can fly using different Themyscirian artifacts.
Oh, sure.
So it's like I guess like Boots of Hermes or something like that. And that's kind of the thing. But still, it's like, how does a man who absorbs sunlight fly? He doesn't have wings.
You have to consider. you have to
to
consider it levitation.
Yeah, because I mean, like with Batman, like in live actions at least, you hardly see him ever use his grapple hook. He just jumps off a building and glides around. Like before, it was like grapple hook, grapple hook, grapple hook, grapple hook. Like that's the only way he's moving around. Now, even Spider-Man in live action, he has like wings and doesn't really web around too much.
Oh yeah, a little flying squirrel.
But then that's kind of
outfit.
like that was like I feel like more of an artist rendering back in the day. But anyways,
we writers take their liberties to tell the stories they want to tell. I guess.
True.
Was there ever a time like you felt like you took a liberty with something?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time?
No, I mean, really, every episode you write, you have to astonish people. You have to give them something they haven't seen before. And that's always, and then that falls under your definition of taking a liberty, right?
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
You have to push them. You have to push the characters in different directions, have them encounter adversaries that they've never encountered before, and deal with problems and limits and weaknesses that they've never dealt with before. All the time, everything you ever do.
how do you make it interesting? How do you make plots difficult for Superman?
Yeah.
How do you do that? I mean, it's a tough one.
You give him the parasite who just sucks his abilities away.
What?
Or I mean, one of the episodes that made me very happy to write was the late Mr. Kent, where that all that was is a problem that Clark had, which is that everybody thought he was dead.
Oh, okay.
So here's Superman going, what am I supposed to do? How can I be Clark again? And that was a secret identity issue. It had nothing to do with gigantic powers or anything.
I think those are the stories that actually tend to like resonate with people the most because it's again you're in a way people look for superheroes for a little bit of escapism, but then also if you give them a story, it's like, oh, they're 3-dimensional, they could live and breathe, they could be among us, and that kind of allows them to transcend the medium a bit, and then you get the super fans. So,
Yeah.
Like Tom.
yeah.
Was there ever, I mean, you've mentioned in our conversations of like being a big fan of comics, was there ever a time where you got to basically kind of, I don't know, apply a storyline that you have read and were a big fan of, like actually start writing something that was similar to that and that you got really excited about? Like, ooh, I'm writing this.
You mean beside adaptations?
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, there's either adaptations, I don't know if I'm wording this correctly, but I guess I would consider adaptations if there was ever a chance or a time that you were like, oh, I'm so excited that I get to
I did
adapt
those
ones.
too. I was excited about that.
Yeah.
I know.
I thought this question was going to go in a different direction because I remember working on Superboy in 1990. And remember the one I told you about, Ron Ely being the old Superman?
Yes.
There's also a little boy who played a very young Superboy.
So you had them 3 ages.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in that one, that little boy, in that world, that little boy is kidnapped by Lex Luthor.
Mm.
And Luthor uses the kid to do bad things, rob a bank. But he tells the kid, because the kid has an inherent sense of morality, he says, this bank is where all the bad people hide their money. So go in and use your superpowers to break it. So it's all shot and everything. And years later, I'm watching an old rerun of the George Reeves Superman. And it's about an alien from Mars, like a goofy little guy who's an alien. And that exact bit is used where the bad guys,
Manipulate the alien.
manipulate him exactly that way. And I thought, well, I remembered it, but I had no memory of it when it was written.
You had the skeleton on there, and now we're just putting a new face on it, which is
No, I didn't. I had no memory
Yeah.
of doing it, but obviously it stayed somewhere in the subconscious.
it's cool.
I felt
Interesting.
embarrassed. I mean, we try to we try to give credit to the people who do this, the original versions, but that one just slipped by.
Yeah. I mean, I know from Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, you're particularly excited to have the kiss sequence with Lex Luthor and Amanda Waller. Spoilers. But
No.
but
I remembered it from the comic book. He just does. He's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no romantic interest there. He just does.
oh yeah, no, it's just showing his escalation of how this serum is making him go mega maniacal powerful, and then like, oh, even Amanda Waller, who's also kind of like in some similar leagues in terms of as sinister as he is in terms of against the superhero community, is now like, oh, we have to go against him.
Yeah.
I remember you were saying that when when it was launching out in 2009.
Oh, you mean 10 years ago? I'm supposed to remember what I said.
Oh no. I keep that in mind.
Tom is like, no, I have my own notes. I've got it. You're good.
No, it was just, I mean, it was a great scene that was in the comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, why not put it in the in the animated version? Again, it might be a little creepy for kids because it's not even a romantic kiss. It's just a guy intruding or imposing on a woman. But we needed to show how crazy he was. I thought it was a good way to do it. You when you adapt something, you always wonder how wedded are the people who've read the comic book to seeing what they see on screen.
Yeah.
In the old days, I mean, books used to be continually adapted to movies, and people would complain, "Oh, it's not as good as the book," or maybe it's better than the book. And there was a whole theory that the worse the book, the better the movie.
Oh.
Interesting.
Oh.
And then would that work vice versa, I'm assuming? The better the book, the worse the movie's going to be because it can't match.
Well, people are disappointed. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, a really good book, people are disappointed. I remember kind of aging out of comic books right around 1961 or so and started reading novels, but, not really, I guess you shouldn't call them kids' novels, but it's the James Bond books.
Okay.
Which are very different from the movies, boys and girls. Very different.
Oh, yeah?
Very?
Yes.
In like what ways?
Racism, sexism.
Oh.
Bond is a kind of a very upper class British guy, and he had the same prejudices that you would expect from a British guy who was born in 1910.
Oh.
No, I have
Wow.
a good
So you've
friend who
read,
reads
you know
it.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have a
right?
good friend who's read all the books, and my dad's a big fan of the books and the movies, and so he's told me it's like, oh, I like the movies because they're fun, but they're nothing like the
Books are way different.
Mhm.
There's no humor in them at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that was sort of, for me, the transition was from the comic books, things with pictures in them, to actual novels.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, right around that time, they started Dr. No came out. So, as a young film critic, an amateur film critic, it's like, well, this is different. This is better. This is worse. I'll tell you one thing. Because of the books, I expected Dr. No to be in black and white for some reason.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because the books had that quality to them. They're like,
Almost a noirish? Would you say that? I haven't read the books personally, so I'm asking for your personal kind of experience.
Read the scene where he meets Honeychild Ryder on the beach for the first time.
Okay.
Because you get the racism and the sexism all in one paragraph.
Bang.
Oh,
Best
wow.
bang for your buck, apparently.
Wow.
But it's very different than how the movie would be.
Well, the movie,
Yeah.
the movie just, without him,
Yeah.
you didn't hear his thought process.
Yeah. It's
So he
devoid of
just
that.
sees
yeah.
he just sees a pretty girl coming out of the water.
But you don't get his inner workings. Yeah.
Thankfully.
Conveniently
Yeah.
left out.
I mean,
Yeah, no.
and anti-Semitic too.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Oh,
if you
boy.
definitely read the books and then watched the movie and you're like, this man. You
Well,
still
in the
don't-
book, I mean, even in the movies, the sexism is really hard to take.
Yeah.
It's just
Wow.
like, well, I'm done with you now. But he
Yeah.
never even would say that.
That's true,
It's
yeah.
just like, I'm just not there anymore.
Yeah, it's a Bond girl, and that's it.
On to the next one.
On to the next one. 25, was it 25, 26? 26 Bond movies?
25, I think.
25, yeah.
Wow.
That's what it is. That's an interesting point of view, and I like how that you since you've had the experience of reading the books as well as then starting to watch the books, like you kind of, and as well as adapting it, like you kind of get that full circle, like, oh, this is how your brain was, taking that all in.
Corrupted.
Yeah.
It's really that's accurate to say, because when you're 11 years old and you're reading this stuff, you're going, well, this is what adulthood's going to be like,
Oh, yeah.
and it's
Nothing like that at
It is
all.
not
No.
that, boys and girls.
No.
One bit of trivia: I got George Lazenby a job.
Ooh.
Oh,
Her
really?
Majesty's Secret Service, baby. Eh?
He worked on Superboy, but that's not the job I got him.
Okay.
There's a show called Cover Up that Glenn Larson produced. It was about kind of espionage.
Okay.
Hmm.
And there was an episode that I wrote on that was set on a cruise ship where there was a lot of gambling going on. And it was sort of kind of based on Casino Royale,
The original Casino Royale?
the book.
Okay, the book.
Where it's, the good guys use a card game to deprive a bad guy of his money.
Yes.
That was part of it. And the other part of it was kind of Agatha Christie, where people keep dying in it.
Okay.
And I wrote the script and I said, hey, to the producer, hey, have you thought about hiring George Lazenby for this? And they went, oh, yeah, let's do it. And there he was.
Wow.
And this is
was.
right after he had been Bond?
Yes.
Okay.
This was actually in 1985.
Okay.
So he hadn't been Bond in a long
Oh,
time.
wow.
Mhm.
But he was great.
I mean, but also still, it's like George Lazenby. You know,
He
one
played,
Bond film.
he played a British Secret Service
Yeah,
agent.
so you
Yep.
can have him in there. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, and backtracking a little bit with the adaptation question, like how, you know, you're talking about wedding people, you know, how people have wedded to certain details in the
Yes.
stories.
Yes.
What kind of process do you, as well as the other writers and people you work with, decide which ones you find more important to put in or include, or, you know, like, because, you know, going to make a certain time limit and all that?
My only answer is instinct on that.
Mm.
I mean, you read what they did. There are certain things that jump out at you, and then there are certain sections that are maybe just kind of expository or unnecessary.
Yeah.
In Public Enemies, remember, Public Enemies was coming out as a contemporary thing. It came out issue after issue.
Yeah.
And at the same time it was coming out, there was all sorts of other things going on in the DC world.
Yeah.
So there's a moment in the comic book where the old Superman shows up.
Okay.
And it made sense, you know, in the run of the comic book, because if you're you know reading it when it was coming out, you'd say, yeah, this is great, you know, and this is tying into the other part of it. But if you're doing a standalone, that has to go,
Yeah.
because it just seems like,
It's out of nowhere.
yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, this sounds like another challenge of adaptation, especially when you have long form comic book stories where, like, you know, they're connected to all these different things, and sometimes they're part of like tie-in events or like big crossover events. So how, you know, choosing what to have and what to have in there to make sure it's
Well,
standalone.
a lot of adaptation is really editing,
Mm-hmm.
especially on New Frontier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of that had to be cut. I mean, they talked about making it a two-parter, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out where part one would end and part two would begin. Because really, to me, Justice League New Frontier is really the Green Lantern origin story.
Yeah, it is. It's a great. I that's what I really liked about it. So I never read the comic book New Frontier, but I watched the film and I was like, this is a great origin story just for him, because you see him get the ring and then get thrown into this world of heroes, and, you know, it serves as well as like the change of, you know, Batman's, like how he, you know, went for the purple gloves to the gauntlet.
costume.
Yeah, and then how, you know, the world viewed Superman, as well as Diana coming back into the world. So like and also Martian Manhunter too.
Yeah.
A little bit of Martian Manhunter. So it's like,
It was his full origin.
yeah, so I think it's a wonderful film, and like, yeah, choosing what bits to put in there, but also, you know, keeping certain elements that tied it to, I guess, the time it came out in, because, you know, there's speeches.
No, this one was completely sealed. It was its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't tie into anything else that was coming out at that time.
Mm-hmm.
What Darwin was doing was hard enough, which is to tie in all of the DC heroes and then tie that into what was going on in the world at the dawn of the Silver Age, which would have been starting in the early 50s.
Yeah, because at the very end, there's the speech.
The John Kennedy speech that we got.
Which it's in a weird way. Like, I remember watching the film. That's like one of my favorite parts, because you see how all the characters grow and they grow through time, and then it leaves on a really nice, you know, justice and hope, you know, note. Because as long as like villains will be there, then the heroes will still be there too.
So I'm kind of on the flip side, because I am of the uncultured. With Batman Beyond, of course, was using some of the old animated series and some of what was going on in DC animated, but it was essentially something that you guys could build.
Towards the end, Batman Beyond became more integrated.
Yeah.
But for the first, 50 episodes, or at least, it was just, they were all in their own world. And I didn't seem to be any crossovers at that point.
I think the biggest notes were like, you know, you had some old characters, so like Freeze, Bane. You had Ra's al Ghul, Talia al Ghul.
Well, yeah, the time didn't mean too much to him.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
And then, you know, the whole end of the Batman Beyond doesn't get wrapped up until Justice League.
Right.
With epilogue.
Which that was not planned at the beginning,
yeah.
of course.
But
Well, I mean, I guess my thought is there a little bit more freedom when you have something like that, when you're like, you're using characters as source material, but then you kind of get to it's almost like you get to write your own comic book.
Or TV show. Yeah.
Yeah, or a TV
for
show.
Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
That was the case. That was the most freedom I've had in writing TV animation.
Wow.
Do you have much resistance for any like super original
Decisions?
ideas, or
God, we never
did they want you to stick
hardly
with
ever got any
Batman?
notes.
That's great.
Really?
I don't even know who the network guy was.
Wow.
That means you hardly ever heard.
Sid Eiwanger was the network exec on that first Batman animated,
Mhm.
and also the network exec on X-Men and Spider-Man, because they were all initially on Fox, all three of those.
Mhm.
But then Batman moved over to WB, the kids WB. But
I remember that.
I always got a lot of notes from Sid when we were on Spider-Man.
Mhm.
But on this other stuff, I honestly don't remember if there were anybody gave us notes.
Wow.
Wow.
On Justice League on Cartoon Network, it was even less.
Wow.
Really?
It sounds like they trusted you.
Well, we were doing an Aquaman story,
Mm-hmm.
and
Just-
just how Aquaman had the hook.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So he's in a trap, and the world's going to end.
I believe-
He cuts off his own hand,
To save his
and
child.
the guy from Cartoon Network said, you're not going to actually show the hand being severed on screen, are you? And we went, no. And he goes, okay, that's my only note.
Wow.
Wow.
But it's really well done.
I do
Yeah.
I do take it back a little bit. At some point when we did Return of the Joker,
Mm-hmm.
which was Batman Beyond,
Yeah.
Mhm.
at that point a new person had taken over the kids WB,
Okay.
and you probably know about this. I can't even remember. Somebody was killed in it
In the show.
in Return of the Joker.
Oh yeah, it was Bonk or no, it was one of the main clown dudes, and it was with a gun, and
right.
they edited it to have to have gas instead, because he shot him with a bang. The Joker shot him with a bang gun and shot just a little thing, a dart, and then in I think the uncut version, he shoots it again and then actually shoots the dart
Yeah,
out. And
because
then,
that was a note that
Mm.
that happened because of the note from the new person at the kids WB.
and that also
She
happened.
freaked out. I mean, she said, "Look, we're not even gonna publicize this thing unless you get rid of that killing thing."
Whoa.
That happened
Wow.
on 3 occasions, I think.
And the same one.
In the same one, because at the end when they do the origin of what happened to Tim Drake, and then how he got taken over by the Joker, and then he in the released VHS that I own in the black clamshell, they have it where Tim Drake pushes him into this electric chair thing, and then that's how he dies. But then I think in the the real written one, the way it was he has the same bang gun and shoots him, and that's how he dies. And then Mark Hamill says that's not funny and dies.
That was a huge.
Oh, yeah.
That was that censorship was a big deal.
It's interesting. I didn't know about that until like way after I watched it, and I was like, whoa, what happened? Because I remember there's certain parts where like during that same flashback, Kevin Conroy, Batman, and Mark Hamill's Joker, they're like beating each other back and forth. But then there's a point where the Joker does kind of like this rope-a-dope, puts one hand up, and then Batman looks at it, but then the other hand like punches him.
Mhm.
And I think the original story or the original writing was that he had a knife and stabs Batman, and then Batman falls down this like these giant like ABC blocks,
Oh yeah.
and then that's when he's like paralyzed and can't move.
The reason that it was
Wow.
written that violently was we just thought, well, this is a DVD.
Mm-hmm.
That won't go on the network.
We can do whatever we want.
Well, there are limits. There are limits that we impose. I mean, some of the people who write these things have kids. And
Oh yeah.
They knew. But what the trap they fell into was it never occurred to them that the network would then step forward, because it wasn't for the network.
Mm-hmm.
But yet
Yeah.
the
Right.
network would step in and say, you know what? If you want us to publicize this, you got to get rid of the killing.
Wow.
Interesting.
No, I forget. I think I saw like a clip of it online, and that's the only way I knew that of his existence. And we recently just did, Batman had its 20th anniversary,
Mhm.
and then so we did an episode for at the beginning of this year, and then we had Andrea Romano on the show.
Oh,
and
Batman
then,
Beyond. Yeah.
yeah,
I
and,
just saw her the
Yeah.
other night. Yeah, she's doing good.
and then we also had Kevin Conroy a while back as well. So we're slowly getting all of the the glorious
roster.
DC Unity group, everyone around. I have a question, kind of just expanding a little bit of the gamut. You've worked on shows such as like G.I. Joe, Avengers Assemble, as well as like Ben 10.
Right, as a freelancer and all those.
What's that experience like? These different types of characters, as well as the freelance writing going into that, like compared to your other works.
You go and you do an assignment. I mean,
Mhm.
what I find really helpful is that on most of those shows, the head writers will give you a premise that's fairly well detailed,
Okay.
and that's
Okay.
that's the hardest part of an episode, really. But they have to do it because so much stuff now is serialized.
Mm-hmm.
Ben 10 was freestanding, but they had kind of themes that went through.
Mhm.
Yeah. I love Ben 10.
I got that in China. I
Oh,
was in China earlier this year.
okay.
And I mean, this stuff is known throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing a comic book. I shouldn't say that I was doing it, but I was consulting on a comic book that required a trip to El Salvador.
Oh,
Really?
Now,
Wow.
that was a year ago.
Required a trip?
Yes, for research.
that's awesome. I mean,
And
is it awesome?
and we in doing the research, we talked to a guy who had been in MS-13,
Oh, wow.
and this guy he did the whole interview in Spanish, talking about what it was like and how to get out of it. And then the translator said, "These people who you've been talking to, they did the Batman cartoon." And then in English, the MS-13 guy goes, "I love Batman."
Yeah, that's awesome.
So this stuff is all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. I mean, I went to a comic convention in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia,
Okay.
and
Wow.
a young girl who worked at the Virgin Megastore in Jeddah said, reading about Bruce Wayne, it really helped me get through my adolescence.
Oh.
That's awesome.
I mean,
Wow.
it's just everywhere.
Affecting lives.
In China, and as I said.
I mean, on top of that, Saudi Arabia, you work on comic books,
We're
Saudi
working-
Girls.
We're working on one of those right now. Thank you for the plug.
No, I remember you talked about it at Comic-Con, and I remember like it was kind of explicitly you're like, it sounds like it potentially could be highly political, but there's a lot of great stories, and I think there's like several different comics.
Yeah, it's a whole world. I mean, the guy who runs the company is called Fad
Mhm.
Al Saad, and the only place you can really find out about it now is SaudiGirlsRevolution.com.
Yeah.
And talking about having a lot of freedom to write. I mean, it's been great writing for him. We're working on something right now. The closest thing that I can tell you that you'd know about to what I'm doing would be the time machine from the point of view of the Morlocks.
That's cool.
Except they're not really Morlocks. They're more human.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And the Morlocks tend to live in the upper world.
So for our audience at home or listening or watching right now, SaudiGirlsRevolution.com has several comic books.
Several.
So New Kingdom, Latifa,
Yeah.
as well as I Am Infidel. Can you give us a little bit of explanation of any of these?
Well, Fod created it.
Mhm.
He described himself as a Stanford frat boy.
Okay.
He was born in Saudi Arabia, educated here, and a businessman. And he loved Marvel. He was a Marvel guy.
Okay.
And he's created this gigantic, vast world. It's a post-apocalyptic Arabian Peninsula.
Ah.
So
Interesting.
much of the culture's gone and sort of rebuilt.
Mhm.
And it's just been great working for him. I mean, lets you do whatever you want.
It looks interesting. The art looks fantastic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got it on my
You guys
That's
hold
iPad
that
the
here.
Latifah you're looking at?
We got some Latifa and I Am Infidel and New Kingdom. And New Kingdom, I mean, so
You-
all Yeah.
New Kingdom, I just finished the script on, so I haven't
He's like,
seen
show me
any
the art.
oh,
I want to see.
I just have it on the website. It just says,
It could just be
different-
cover
It's
art.
a cover. It's a
Yeah,
cover, right?
cover.
Yeah.
So like I remember before the episode, I tried to like find it, try to download it, read it, and I think they have Latifa 1 on
yeah,
Comixology.
I wrote that
Yeah.
Mm.
with Fod.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our first collaboration.
That is awesome.
And so that one that there's a character with the sword, right?
Yeah.
And the sword's like an AI.
Yeah, it talks.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Ooh.
I just like read as much as I can. I was like, I don't know, and so I'm hoping you can.
In terms of tone, it's the closest thing I can think of that you all would know would be the most recent Mad Max movie,
Okay, Fury Road.
Oh, yeah.
but
Okay.
without Max.
All right. So Furiosa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as you might guess from the title of the website, Fod is very interested in helping women gain more rights.
That's awesome.
So
Heck yeah.
So yeah, all the story, all
Yeah,
the
all three
different,
of them.
all the comic books usually have a main character story, like New
Female.
Kingdom specifically.
New Kingdom is going to be 7 issues.
And that follows a girl who's lives in a.
She's one of the
Underground.
non-Morlocks.
Oh, okay, so in the underground, but then rises up, and she has like a half human, half animal, half robot.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's 3 halves. to it.
Component.
Three halves.
Yeah. So
Genetically engineered and then cybernetic.
yeah, and so I mean, yeah, there's like these, and are these all connected stories at all, or are these going to be their own?
See, Fod created a gigantic world.
Mhm.
and he set it all spinning, and they all live in the same world, but
Okay.
some of them don't come in contact with each other.
Maybe different times or something like that. Like
Not different times. It all focuses around one huge event.
okay.
In New Kingdom, though, it begins around now, and then it just follows generation after generation
Okay.
to the contemporary story.
That's awesome.
So it's a huge world, and he's bringing in lots of different writers and artists to help realize it.
Wow.
I might check this out. This looks really interesting.
Yeah.
I hope so.
How did you get it? Get involved?
Friend of a friend,
Friend of a friend.
same old way.
How it always
Every
happens.
single one of your stories. How does it?
You should do. Well, it's because
No people.
I'd worked on a show called The 99,
Okay.
which was set in the Middle East,
Mhm.
and someone who knew me from that said, "Oh, well, he's a Middle Easterner. Maybe you could do it. Maybe you could work with him." And I did, but the Middle East of Saudi Girls Revolution is very, very different from the one of today.
Mm,
It's a post-apocalyptic environment,
okay.
Mhm.
and they just said they're starting the artwork now. So I'm
That's
really,
awesome.
really excited.
That's
about
exciting.
Yeah. So I'm on the website, and most things are just coming soon. So they're
Coming
not
soon.
okay. So they're not available yet.
No.
Okay.
So
So
Latifah is.
and yeah, issue 1's on Comixology. Is it where will they be? Will they be in like brick and mortar stores?
I hope so, but go to the website. And they'll
Okay.
tell you.
Cool. That's the
Anywhere,
best
everywhere.
place to go to.
Mhm.
SaudiGirlsRevolution.com.
Well, I mean, kind of going on, kind of hinting at what you were just saying, of saying you were saying it's kind of the way that it goes, knowing like a friend of a friend kind of thing.
Yeah.
With everything that you've had in your life, like daytime Emmys, you've got the Lifetime Achievement Award with WGA.
That was like a funeral.
What?
It's like attending your own funeral, like
Yeah.
a memorial service.
man.
Really?
Yeah. People. Well, it started. I mean, part of the reason I got that WGA award was, or maybe most of the reason, was for trying to get more animation covered by the Writers Guild. Because some of it's covered by the Writers Guild of Canada, some of it's covered by the Writers Guild of America, some of it's covered by the crew union, which is IATSE, and some of it's not covered at all.
Wow.
So having a union's good. You have a friend who's having, the missing person here is having eye surgery.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's really good when medical insurance medical insurance you've gotten through your union pays for your medical bills.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Trust me on that one, guys and girls.
So
It will
If
be
only.
it will be very helpful.
what?
But anyway,
you
so
could-
the reason I got that was that, and I wanted to use the ceremony to talk about organizing more. And at some point, I think it was Bob Goodman, just said, "You know what? We've been answering these questions about unionization. I just want to tell you what a great guy you are."
Oh.
And then it was exactly like a memorial service, except I wasn't dead.
Oh my
People
gosh.
talking about you in the
Well, the
past.
other, your
achievements.
friends who are there,
Yeah.
they chip in, they tell you what a great guy you are. And it really felt like, at a certain point, it just went, oh my God, this is what my funeral will be like.
So
So I told my wife, no funeral.
No funeral.
Just give you
I
an
feel like I already had
no,
it just now.
just cremate me, dump me in Santa Monica Bay.
Wow.
well, wow.
That's actually in the will.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So with all of your achievements, could you say that you have rules for success that you would tell young writers or aspiring people?
Yes, I can tell you one story. Rather than giving out rules, I can tell you a story.
Yes, please.
Okay.
That'll work.
Yes.
Many years ago, right out of film school, it's like, well, here I am. Hire me to be a director, please.
Yeah, I know exactly. I
Did-
went to film school. I get.
Which one did you go to?
I went to Sacramento State and I studied on film production.
UCLA for me,
Okay.
local, local boy. Anyway, so the best job I could get was working for Russ Meyer as a grip on one of his films. And that's a non-union, totally non-union, except for the actors. And, it's a tiny, tiny crew. You see, when you go by a film site, you see like all these people and some of them are standing around. Russ Meyer, there's like 6 people. And the whole crew is 6 people.
Wow.
And one night we were about to head out to a location, and I had to go home to pack, and I was in a hurry to get out. And they were sitting there arguing about where they're going to buy the batteries for the sound recorder.
Mm.
Do we go to this Thrifty's? Do we go to that Thrifty's? This one might be closed. So I go like that. I look at my watch because I need to get back home to pack for the next day. And Meyer just blew up at me. Blew up. Like, this is important stuff we're doing. And I realized at that point that the business you're in, film, isn't a 9-to-5 job. It's a 5-to-9 job.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ugh.
when I left the next day, I left my wristwatch at home.
Wow.
because I knew that every minute of my time the company owned. If you have that attitude, I think it would be helpful. I cannot guarantee you that it'll give you talent though.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of making sure that the project you're on or whoever you're working with, their time is the priority.
100%. I mean, sometimes as a freelancer, you find yourself working on 2 different projects.
Yes, sir.
And I hate doing that because you can't really give yourself.
Yeah.
You can't give of yourself entirely to the one thing.
Your attention's divided.
Yeah, you're one foot in, one foot out. You don't know where you want to be.
Yeah, and your employer, even if you're just a lousy freelancer, he wants you to be doing that thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all you'll do.
Yeah.
So devote the time in.
All of it. I mean, you're completely in. I mean, I've seen the opposite happen where, I'll work in the office job part-time and I'll do my script part-time and doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. It's a hard because it's a right now, especially with anything, it's always a risk. And the office job and then writing the script on the side is kind of like the convenient thing. But then if you dedicate the time, the hours, and the days, and the nights, and they all blend to one, hopefully they aggregate into where you just meet somebody.
Well, I mean, you film school is good for that. I mean, you do meet people, and then they end up hiring you.
I've always said it's not because I went to acting school as well, and they always used to say the old cliche is it's who you know, and it's really who knows you too. Like it's you. It's a circle of like somebody might think of you. Oh yeah, I know somebody who does that.
Which is why you always have to be acting and working all the time and being visible.
Be on.
Be on. I have a random kind of off topic because I was doing a little bit of research about you. What is a film preservationist? Because you did that at one point, correct?
Yeah, sort of.
What?
He says with such pride.
So this is one of those, one freelancer.
No. I'm denigrating my own capabilities in that area.
Oh, okay.
The company, a teacher of mine from film school, right after film school, he quit UCLA and formed his own post-production company doing short educational films. And they needed, for some reason, the films were already made, but they didn't have narrations. So another teacher of mine from UCLA recommended me and some others to write the narrations. So that's how I got involved with that company. And then the company kind of morphed from doing post-production to eventually preserving film.
So what
does it do?
Yeah, what is that?
A lot of it is just, getting old negatives, sometimes nitrate.
Oh, wow.
And going over them and, trying to physically make sure the sprockets will run through a machine. And then once you do that, then you make new fine grains off the negatives, and then you make new negatives off the fine grains.
Wow.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That company, it went out of business probably 4 or 5 years ago because everything now is video. It's or
It's
digital.
even going
I guess
digital.
you call it digital.
A company that I work at now, they only just this last year went straight to digital video from tape. We were doing
tape.
Yeah, so we were still laying back to tape, and every other studio that I worked at was just send me the
Digital.
QuickTime video.
Yeah.
And now it was like it's such a totally different experience.
A few years ago, I met a guy who's younger than me, but older than all of you, who is a cinematographer.
Mhm.
And I said, just out of curiosity, have you ever used film? And he goes, no,
Yeah.
never.
Yeah.
It's just all on a
Wow.
digital media.
As an audio guy, like my teachers in audio school, they were always talking about the way that they used to mix records and film
Oh, yeah.
on tape, and it's like I won't get to experience that because I would just love to see
Good
it.
riddance to it. No, I mean, seriously, in that film company I worked at,
Yeah.
You'd get a 35 millimeter negative and you'd make whatever cuts you'd have to, and you'd sit with tape.
Cut your fingers, they always
No.
used to say. No?
No.
Only
never
if you
did.
sucked, I guess.
This is something else. No, you'd use tape to repair the sprockets that are damaged, and then you'd run it in the darkroom through the printer, making a clean copy of it. And then it would be developed in that same building. So there's this giant tank of chemicals, and God knows what the chemicals did or are doing now to my lungs.
Yeah.
But the film would run through those. Supposedly it's well ventilated, but who knows? So good riddance to film. And also, also those heavy. When I worked for Russ before we were doing the film, I worked in his distribution office. It's the same office, it's just a different room.
Yeah.
And a film was in 2 big heavy cases.
Oh, the reels.
About 40 pounds apiece. And then you'd have to put them up on the upper shelf. You guys know what a film looks like now, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard drive.
It's a hard drive.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about the size of what a 3/4 inch video disc, 3/4 inch videotape cassette used to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for IMAX, they're still on film, which is
Really?
impressive. And I don't know if you've seen those IMAX,
The
like
cameras?
the giant reels of IMAX
Big
film,
tables,
Oh.
because they're like 2 or 3 inches per frame for IMAX film.
Yeah,
It's wild.
it's crazy. It's still, you could probably do it better with digital, I would think.
Probably. They might have moved to digital, but I think it was for The Dark Knight or something. I forgot what movie it was, but it was like just
On tape.
giant reels of IMAX film. It's massive.
And crazy. There's no point to it anymore. I mean,
No.
a couple New Years ago, my wife and I saw Singing in the Rain
Mm.
in San Francisco. And I, just out of curiosity, I asked one of the people at the theater, so were we watching film or were we watching video? And they got in an argument. They didn't know at their own theater what they were running.
Whoa.
Did you plug something in and press play, or
you
did you
couldn't tell.
move film?
But the way you could tell is they didn't have those little projector changeover.
Yeah,
things.
You know, I haven't seen those in a
Yeah,
very
I know.
long time.
I know. All gone.
I do want to have one question. We will have like a last year question, but I do one bonus question. On one of the junkets, you were talking about Batman Beyond, and we were talking, it's coming out soon, and remastered on October 29th for the box set. But you kind of mentioned a little bit about there was murmurs, and there was a script for a live action.
Either a script or a treatment. Now,
treatment.
I never saw either one, but I knew what was going on.
You
I mean,
heard about it, yeah.
No, I was in the same office. Alan and Paul and Boaz Yakin were writing this together.
Oh, right.
And Boaz, who did Remember the Titans.
Yes.
And so, I mean,
Nice guy, really nice guy.
did you have any, and it would have been like a live action version, and this was around the time that Batman Beyond was going on at the same time. So
And they already had someone slated to be.
No, that was a rumor that I might have started. I read it somewhere on the internet. Somebody had, by coincidence, was standing in a movie theater line near Paul Newman.
Oh yeah, and
Newman was talking about, well, they want me for this Batman thing, as Bruce Wayne. So it would have been
Wow.
Paul Newman,
That would've been
maybe.
Interesting.
I mean, in your, from your experience as well as sitting around and meeting everyone, like what your thoughts would have been, or your ideas, what that would have made the big screen.
I don't know. I don't know what the story was. Supposedly, the rumor, you could talk to Alan Burnett about this, or Paul Dini.
Can we bring him on the show with you next time?
Each of them is worth a show on their own.
Okay, yeah,
Fair.
Or more than that.
please, yeah.
Unfortunately, Alan lives in Florida now, but
Mhm.
Paul's right here in
Mhm.
Burbank.
Ooh,
I don't know what the storyline was, but the rumor was that it would have been R-rated.
Whoa.
And the
Interesting.
studio would not have, that would have been too much for the studio. At that time, they were, the Joker was just a little glint in their eye at that point,
Mhm.
if that. And, a superhero show rated R would have been something that the studio probably would have considered to be problematic in
like
terms of box
blasphemous.
office.
Could have
No,
been,
not
yeah.
blasphemous. Just like, well, we're going to
Box
cut out.
office,
We're going to
yeah.
cut out. 2/3 of our audience. So
Right.
Don't want to do that.
Too
Wow.
dangerous.
Mhm.
So with all of the what we like to do in our shows, we don't want to just talk about your career. We want to talk about stuff that you're a fan of too.
We haven't
And-
already done that.
Well, I mean, like growing up, you've talked about comic books. You like, what are you a fan of now? And like, what are you still a fan of? Are you still a reader of comic books? Are you still, what kind of fan are you now?
I read comic books for work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't do it in personal time?
Very rarely. I mean, if there's something really weird and unusual, like a Frank Miller thing,
okay.
Yeah.
I'll try to locate that. Or Alex Ross. I love Alex's artwork. We tried to get him for Saudi Girls. He was just too busy.
Mm.
But no, I'm not. I don't read comic books all the time.
Movies? Any TV shows you like?
Comedies.
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 Oddly enough.
What was the most recent one?
And not the kind of comedies you're thinking of.
Oh.
It's Daily Show, Bill
Okay.
Maher,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
John Oliver.
Okay. So like talk variety shows a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Watch baseball during the season.
Team?
The sports.
Dodgers, of course.
Okay. Yeah. Represent.
You have to.
Represent. I see.
Yeah.
That's okay.
No, I grew up in that. I mean,
Sure.
Yeah.
somehow when you're 8 years old, a lot of your tastes come right into being at that point.
It's hard to escape the culture of local teams and local fandoms. And
Yeah, but
Yeah.
part of it too is the family thing. Like your dad
Yeah.
sits down
Yeah.
with you and
Yeah.
explains that, when the batter is running to first base and he leaves the bat at home, he doesn't go home with the bat, leave it there, and then run to first base.
Yeah.
So that was helpful.
I remember being
he
told
brought
those
his bat
things
to the
by my
game. He
dad.
remembered.
Yeah. So there's that nostalgic element too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any what's your favorite movie?
There's just too many.
Too many.
All of them.
I tend to record a lot of film noir stuff.
Okay.
Mm.
They just ran This Gun for Hire on TCM on their film noir
Oh, that's
program.
awesome.
So I record that. My wife, I'm sort of educating her on film noir because she hadn't seen much of it.
You're doing the good work.
She liked Pick Up on South Street, Richard
nice.
Widmark. So a lot of that was the other thing I watch is old black and white movies.
Nice.
Usually film noir, detective, westerns,
Okay.
and old comedies too. Marx Brothers,
Classics.
W.C. Fields.
I mean, yeah.
Very nice.
That's what we would consider classics. Yeah.
Yeah, and occasionally weird things. My wife, we alternate, so she'll find something she wants to see, and it's to me it's always completely out of the blue. Did you guys see the Romanoffs? Matt
Romanoffs.
Weiner's series that he did after Mad Men.
No.
Oh,
Oh.
I saw a couple of episodes. Yeah.
Did you?
I heard
I
of
didn't.
it.
There are other stuff.
So she picked those two last night. So
Oh, that's great.
We watched the first two episodes.
What'd you think?
I thought they were great.
So maybe you might, move towards what she might be watching to watch now. Not so much black and whites and westerns.
Well, we each have our night.
Take turns. Yeah.
she because it is interesting because I would never have. We had the discs for the Romanoffs just sitting there for at least a year,
Mm.
and it just didn't occur to me to grab them. And then for some reason, she saw it and said, "Oh, we should look at this." And it's not a series;
Mm-hmm.
it's the freestanding stories, and the only thing that unites them is that people have the same last name.
Yeah, it's like anthological.
Completely set in different places,
Mhm.
different ages, different actors, completely different, and really interesting stories.
A lot of people like that. It's kind of becoming a really popular
Self-contained?
thing. Yeah. I mean, I think, Twilight
something-
Zone was really big with that at first, but then, Black Mirror is doing it. And then also they do Love, Death, Robots is doing it right now.
Yep.
So a lot of anthologies are like
It-
becoming
it-
really popular now.
Well, that's good because they're more fun to write.
Mhm. Yeah, you were talking about, compared
Well,
to
as
serializing.
for
More
example,
freedom.
as a freelancer, I'm stepping into a series, and they go, right here is where the story begins, and the Hulk is missing,
Mhm.
and then get it to here where there's a red Hulk,
Okay.
and don't do anything else. And I might not even know what happened before or what happens afterwards. I have sort of a general idea, but that's what happens when you're a freelancer. You're part of a train.
Mhm.
And when the episodes are freestanding, you have a little bit more a free reign of imagination.
Yeah. You kind of just like use the characters and round them to the way that you want to just tell one particular story and then call it a day.
If you can, yeah.
Mhm.
And there's a certain satisfaction in a beginning, middle, and end in 22 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or in the case of the comic book I'm doing now, in seven
Yeah.
issues.
Issues.
Mhm.
But I mean, you kind of had that experience as well with, different storylines that you did with Justice League as well, like doing like Secret Society or like Better Tomorrow with like the Justice Lords, like they were just two.
That was just a two-parter.
Yeah, exactly. It was a two-part, but like it's still like a all contained like
Yeah.
that later on would have implications for later seasons for Justice League Unlimited, which was
Yeah.
great. But like it was just
Well-
here's a story and that's it. And then it's like cool. And it's like and then they don't mention it at all.
Justice League Unlimited started purely as an anthological thing.
Did it?
Yeah, and we were going to bring in. It was exciting because we were going to bring in writers who were comic book people, also from all sorts of different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I even tried to get Salman Rushdie.
Oh wow.
Really?
I went up to him at a reading and I said, "I heard you're a fan of Justice League. I have a friend. Call my friend Dwayne McDuffie. Here's his number. And then Dwayne said he never called.
Oh,
His loss.
yeah.
But it
Because
definitely
at
felt
the
that
time,
way.
Rushdie had little kids, and I thought, well, if he grew up on it, what about the kids? So that was the initial plan for that, just freestanding half hours. And so in the early,
You can feel it.
yeah, in the early
Yeah.
season, you see that it's just Warren Ellis.
Warren Ellis.
Warren Ellis.
Warren Ellis did the thing with the atom.
Palmer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, Roy Palmer.
Ray
Palmer.
Yeah.
He did that, and that was an example of a freestanding one.
Mhm.
And then it became more.
Yeah. And
What happened was that a lot of these new people they weren't new people, they were older people who were successful in other areas. They didn't really deliver.
oh,
So at a certain point, it was like, let's just
go back.
Let's go back to the way we had it.
Interesting. Yeah, because
let's make it serialized.
serialized. 'Cause
Serialized.
I remember when it first began, the first episode starts with like just the newer heroes, and then Green Arrow is the one that kind of introduces like,
Right.
hey, we have the street level people. Now we're joining this whole team
Right.
of people. And then you would have that for the first like few rounds. You'd have Hawk and Dove, you'd have the Question, you'd have Vigilante,
Right.
all these other things.
And it's like you have the core just as like there. I think one point Superman gives a speech to like all the heroes.
Yeah,
I think like
Was that the
second
first one?
episode.
I believe that's
so.
the first one.
And so it's kind of like giving the audience and the writers like free reign. I feel like the blessing to go do what they wanted to do,
Yeah,
which
and
would have
we
been
did,
interesting.
and we did for a while, and then
yeah,
it just
it would have been interesting to see if it kept that way.
But interesting, it
Yeah.
felt, I don't know, for me, maybe because I was just young and I had these nostalgia glasses on, but it felt so organic in that sense where I was like, cool, we're going to get this extended roster, and then they're going to be part of the Alpha team, the Bravo team. And, when they go on this, adventure, we're going to have, we'll have this person come along and do that
Yeah,
stuff.
in Unlimited, the idea was we have Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman.
The Trinity.
You got to have at least one of them in every episode.
Yeah. I remember, I forget which episode, but the name of it, but it was the one, it was a girls' fight. And it was just like the gladiator fight room. And then it just got from like Black Canary to Hawk Girl and then to at the end, Diana. And then you had like the new team of girls. So I think you had, forget the character with the amulet who can channel different animals.
Oh,
And then you had,
I know that.
yeah, right. And then I think you had Huntress.
Is that Vibe? No. it wasn't Vibe.
But yeah, we all know the character, but then also
Yeah.
you had like Huntress as well as Canary was in there for sure. But yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool. And it was just an all girls episode. But
And before that, Dwayne and I did a two-parter that was just Hawk Girl and Wonder Woman. All the men were getting sick and dying.
yeah, because it was Cersei who created that poison that like infected all the guys. And
So it was
Interesting.
just the two women.
Vixen with the
Vixen, you're
yeah,
right.
the animal.
Female fox.
Yeah, that's a good. That's a good one.
So here's a good one for you.
Yes, sir.
When we started on Wonder Woman and Hawk Girl, it's like the problem with DC is that the characters are pretty much interchangeable in terms of voices. I mean, you could take those bubbles and just switch them around. And
Okay.
that was a problem I encountered. Anyway. So I said, Rich Fogel, I said, if we're doing one with just Wonder Woman and Hawk Girl, how are they different? And he goes, Stan, let me put it this way. Hawk Girl's been married and Wonder Woman isn't. Oh, okay.
That's good. Yeah, I mean,
There's a knowledgeability and more sophistication and naivete on the part of Wonder Woman.
and especially with the show, how it went on, because you started with first the move, the three, opening with the Martian Manhunter, you did Justice League, and then it ended with Justice League Starcrossed. And then it had the storyline with
Right.
Shayera, with
She-
I forget his name, the other Hawkman.
She's cheating.
Yeah, with Jon Stewart. And then so she gets ousted from the beginning of Justice League Unlimited. And then when you slowly start rolling her back in, because she's hanging out with Dr. Fate and Solomon Grundy, as well as other magic people. So it's kind of like this weird, person who betrayed, but also like, hey, we're the only people that like are, and that's the cool thing about what you guys did with the 6 original members is like, when they're together, nothing's stopping them. And then so it's like these two, women have to like help the rest of the world. Super dope. Super dope.
Well, Stan, thank you so much for taking your time to be here. And
thank you.
Yeah.
So we have Saudi Girls Revolution.
Right.
Definitely, we'll link that in the episode notes. Was there anything else that you wanted our audience to check that out?
Just the Batman Beyond, the
Yeah.
reissue.
Yeah, it's
I
coming
think they'll
out.
like it a lot. This, when you set something in a different time, it doesn't age like, stuff that's contemporary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
holds up because it's in
Yeah,
the
I
future.
think the most fun I've had in animation has been on Batman Beyond. I think.
Me
That's
too.
awesome.
Me too.
Me too.
You worked on it too?
No.
But in terms of working,
I worked on
it was-
watching it.
It was the most fun.
Terry
I hope
McGinnis is my favorite Batman. I mean, Kevin Conroy will always, in that version, but Terry McGinnis was always my favorite
Really?
because he, as you now know, I loved Spider-Man and then I loved Batman, and so I felt he was kind of like the best of both worlds, where he was juggling the alternate identity, the girlfriend, the
High school
mom, the
kid.
brother, the friend Max, who might have been Robin, might have not been Robin.
We tried to kill her.
Yeah.
I think the reasons that Batman Beyond is successful is that it's a very different kind of a hero because both characters are incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
Terry's no good without Bruce. Bruce is no good without Terry. And usually a hero is on his own. I mean, a hero can stand on his own. These two needed each other. They were kind of resentful of the fact that they needed each other. And I think that you don't really see that kind of relationship very often.
Yeah, you don't.
In superhero stuff.
It's interesting because it's very distinctive compared to like the Dick Grayson Bruce Wayne dynamic, because that was very much almost a surrogate father, but also kind of they're closer to partners as well. But this is, as Epilogue showed, they are biological in some sense. And Terry, again, he is as much as Dick Grayson is, but as much as Bruce Wayne is too. So he's kind of like the nice middle ground between them. So he can rebel against Bruce in a way that teaches Bruce. So I thought that was,
Yeah.
I just love that.
Still capable of learning it, even
Mhm.
at that old age.
Yeah. And I mean, I just, random thing, what would you want to do further on? Because, I think at the announcement, Bruce Timm said, like, if there's a lot of good feedback with it, there's potential to come back.
That'd be great. but they've already given, I think, too much information about them.
Ooh.
No, I mean, you're just based on what has already been presented.
Made.
Yeah, you know too much. I like the original relationship where it's the older guy and the apprentice, the novice apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
That relationship, to me, worked very well and was very easy to write for and a lot of fun.
I mean,
Also for me in particular, because I was sort of right in between the ages of the two of them.
mm-hmm.
Kind of, I still remember what it was like to be that age, and I could kind of get a sense of what it would be like to be Bruce's age.
Yeah.
So I felt very comfortable.
Unique perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
You just do it where Bruce dies. And then Terry has to be, the Batman by himself.
Wow.
Spoiler
Wow.
for the new episode 1.
It's a potential. You
Well,
could always.
I did talk about that somewhere.
I believe there's always ideas like where it could potentially go, because I think when that
And Bruce has to die.
That would be quite the hook.
yeah,
I
mean,
the series.
Eventually, I mean, it's just the nature of
life.
of humanity.
Humanity, yeah.
no matter what, you die.
But he's not human.
He's Batman.
He's Batman.
But yeah, that'd be really interesting. And then you'd see wherever like the Batman family goes. I mean, if as you said, they reveal a lot about Matt, his
Little
brother.
brother, yeah.
And so if he has the same genetic makeup as well, he could potentially be a Robin. And so I was like, oh, that could be, in my mind, but like,
Well, when people who don't know anything about Batman, when they just open the comic book, they go, "Is Robin his son?" They always ask that.
Mhm. And I mean, I
And
think
then you have to explain, no, it's his ward. Why would a single man have a young boy as a ward? Oh God.
And then they create Batwoman to make sure, that doesn't.
And
that
on the
agenda-
TV series, it was Aunt Harriet.
Yeah.
They had that chaperone.
Mm-hmm.
Just distasteful. But if you really want to see something awful, look at the 1949 Batman serial.
1949
Oh, no.
Batman.
Do you know
serial.
it?
No.
No.
You really need to see
I'm
it.
going to take a note of that.
We
right
will.
now. 1949
Came out the year I was born,
Okay.
and it is not just as a superhero project, but as a movie. It's one of the worst things ever made
Wow.
Wow.
because part of it is squandering potential, and you guys know what the potential of Batman
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Squandered completely. Made everyone on the show was just like, let's do the work and get home. How quickly can we
Oh.
get home?
Oh
Wow.
no.
It was assignment. Just get out.
Yeah, how quickly can we get home? Batman, Creature of the Night, no nighttime shooting. Oh, and which villain did Batman use of the whole rogues gallery?
I'm worried to
Condiment
even
King.
know.
Somebody with no makeup needs, probably.
Clock
The
King.
Wizard,
Wow.
What?
the man who just simply wears a black hood.
Wow.
It's like, okay, I understand that the Joker would scare kids. That big grin. You've looked at,
Laughing Man.
Conrad Veidt,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
You've seen those pictures.
Yes.
Scare. We don't want to scare the children. Okay,
No.
well, I accept that. Penguin's lame. Riddler's lame. What about Catwoman? A villainous.
Yeah.
Would've been
You could-
great.
and you could hide her identity, and you wouldn't know whether it was Vicky Vale or Selena Kyle or maybe a third party. No, they didn't think to do that. It's just
Oh
like,
my god.
let's just do hack work here.
Oh.
And the Batmobile?
No.
Oh no.
Want to guess?
It's a
VW Bugs.
It's a caddy.
I'm just kidding.
Cadillac.
It's a 1949 Mercury convertible.
Yes.
And Bruce and Dick drive around in the convertible
During
and-
the day.
And when they want to change into Batman and Robin, they just
Oh,
pull
the
the
top.
top.
And they just like hold the wheel while I change my jacket, kind of thing.
There's simply nothing in it. Even in the costume, the Robert Lowry, who plays Batman in this one, Robert Lowry is more intimidating as Bruce Wayne than he is as Batman.
Wow.
Oh, man.
Because of the costume, probably.
The costume just looks
Just
so
looked
lame.
ridiculous.
It's like something you got from a cheap costume store. Robin
It might have been.
clearly wears one of those Lone Ranger masks. That
Yes.
you could, if you're old enough, you remember being able to buy those at the 5
Yeah,
minute
yeah,
store
yeah.
Yeah.
with the elastic thing around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Robin.
Wow.
Wow.
Really cheap, really awful.
I smell a bad movie night
and
coming up.
as
I think
bad
so.
as it was, it was made in 1949. It was still in theaters as late as 1960 because I saw it in a movie theater when they had kiddie matinees. They would run like 2 westerns or something,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and then between them they'd run some cartoons and the serial to keep you coming back week after week.
Wow.
True.
Wow.
I like how that activated Siri.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Did it really?
Serial Siri. That's good.
Oh God!
Well,
so
yes.
that was awful. So
I'm going to check that out now.
Thank you for that golden nugget because
Oh,
we're
yes.
gonna watch that now. I
I
think.
love to open the camera.
So Saudi Girls Revolution, Batman Beyond, 1949 Batman.
Batman
series.
series. But somehow, I mean, as bad as it was, the thing was still kicking around, making money as late as 11 years after it was shot.
Also, read some Bond.
Yeah. Yes.
Also,
God.
read Bond,
Read
not
Bond.
watch
Read Bond
Bond.
to get
Just-
perspective.
Dr. No will be enough, I think.
Okay. Gotcha now. That's it. Those are
That
the
specific paragraph, and you'll be done.
The scene where she comes out of the water.
Yeah,
Oh,
stick
for that
no,
paragraph.
No, I will not see this.
Oh, wow.
We'll get taken off the air.
Well, thank you
Probably.
so much for joining us.
Well, you're certainly welcome. Thank you. I had a great time, and I'll
Yeah.
give you some numbers of people to talk
oh,
Yes,
Have some
please.
future guests.
we'd love that.
to. Okay.
Everybody at home, thank you so much for stopping by, listening, or watching on YouTube. We really appreciate you all for stopping by. If you, I lost my words. I can do this.
Share us with your family and friends.
There it is.
If you want to rate us on iTunes, we'll take that as well. We always like to hear your feedback.
That stuff
We're always
does work.
growing.
If you're new to Nerd On and what we do, it's nerdon.tv. That is our website. It has all of the information about us, all of the different podcasts and shows and different stuff that
and
we
merch, like
Yes.
like this shirt with our logo.
do. Yes, yes, yes.
For those that are watching a video right now
Mhm.
and can see it.
If you can't see it, then go to nerdon.tv.
Oh.
But that's it. You know the drill. As always,
Nerd on. Hey.
Awesome.
Ending broadcast.